If you prefer being single, I say you should be left alone. And to those who are mad at people for being single by choice, why do you care? What's up, everybody? We've all heard about how the male loneliness epidemic is a thing, though women's outlets tend to celebrate thriving singlehood for women, in contrast to men being lesser because of it, in their opinion. There is a double standard when it comes to how single men are perceived and how single women are perceived. And today, we're going to see just whether that double standard is pointed out or not, or we're going to look more into it with this article from Women's Health: Why Single Women Are Growing in Numbers and Thriving in Life and Health by Amy Wilkinson. Yes, there are some out there who give single women too hard of a time, but men are also given a hard time for being single too. They're seen as losers or incapable or whatever. Before we see just how many double standards are going to be in this article, be sure to give this video a like, comment your thoughts all along the way, especially if you're a single woman yourself and you agree or disagree with what this article has to say. Don't forget to subscribe for cultural commentary and rants from a man caught between generations. And let's keep the conversation going at the Zillennial Nexus Point Discord. Link will be in the description below. Old maid, spinster, childless cat lady. For literally centuries now, everyone from gossip mongers to vice presidential candidates has slung dismissive sobriquets. What does that mean? It's a fancy word for nickname to describe the single woman experience. No doubt is a collection of mental images as vivid as a vacation slideshow whizzed by. Here she is, sitting on her couch, crying into her pint of chocolate peanut butter Haagen-Dazs. Here she is, lying in her bed, binging her 12th hour of true crime documentaries. Here she is, melded to her recliner, suffocating under the weight of 26 British short hairs. And I can think of male equivalents for these. Here he is, sitting on his couch, eating a fast food meal because he has no one to help him cook and he hasn't learned how to cook himself. Here he is, lying in his bed, playing video games and looking at prawn. Here he is, melded to his lawn chair, staring into the abyss. See? It works both ways. Yes, the life of the single woman is dire indeed. But wait, how did these pundits glean such keen insight? Did they ever meet any of these women? Did they ask them how they feel? Or heck, spend time with them? Who gets to decide how women think and feel about being single? Here's a bold idea. How about single women? The truth is, when we begin to listen, really, truly listen, to single women, it quickly becomes evident that society has gotten it so very wrong. Single women, by and large, are actually quite happy, quite fulfilled, and quite content, thank you very much. So are single men. Maybe life isn't perfect, but we still protect our peace. And as their numbers continue to grow, their experiences and wisdom could help shape the way we all approach our mental and emotional well being. We just have to listen as the whispers grow to a roar. Yeah, we're all gonna have to adapt in some capacity. And who knows? Maybe this is actually the evolution of the human race. I mean, I doubt we're gonna start just spawning new people out of thin air rather than the traditional way of making more people. There'll probably be some level of lab grown people, like, what is it? The beginning of Man of Steel, when the way that Krypton worked, the way that and how Superman was the first natural born Kryptonian, and I forget how long it was according to Jor-El. But the point is, we're either going to endure the consequences and adapt to the consequences of more people being single, or we're going to find a way to make it work. Or those who are single for whatever reason will not reproduce, and then the people who end up getting together and reproduce will end up having more as a result because they see fit to do so, or they see, or they feel called to be fruitful and multiply. And you know what? I think in the long run, there's going to be some kind of reversal eventually. Maybe not in our lifetimes. We'll see. The rise of the single woman. Cue Beyonce, because yes, single ladies are having a moment. Between the years 2018 and 2030, the number of unmarried women is projected to increase by 1.2% annually, compared with just 0.8% for the overall US population, according to a 2019 Morgan Stanley forecast in US Census Bureau data. What's more, 45% of women aged 25 to 44, which one could argue are prime marrying ages, will be single by 2030, the largest share in history, up from 41% in 2018. Experts say there are a host of factors spurring this uptick. Well, that ranges prime marrying years depending on, in the modern context, compared to the majority of human history leading up to that. Yeah, for a lot of it, it was early 20s, according to Tim Pool, and then the only people who really didn't were people who couldn't for whatever reason. Like, it happens. But for most of human history, the majority of people still reproduced in some capacity. Again, I stand by my stance that in 2025, nobody should be forced to reproduce just because the majority of human history it was like that. I'm going to do a separate video about how just because we did it for this way for the majority of human history doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. All right, getting back to the article. For one, People are simply getting married later in life. The median age for a woman to marry for the first time was 28.6 in 2021, compared to 20.5 in 1947. This shift is typically attributed to an increased focus on higher education and career goals, but changing cultural norms, hello feminism, and legislative policies, think the Civil Rights Act of 1964, have also rendered marriage less of an imperative for women. After all, how could women of previous generations be self-reliant when they couldn't even get a credit card in their own name until 1974? With financial freedom and opportunities, single women now live independent, autonomous lives. And for stuff we don't know how to do or want to do, there's TaskRabbit. Translation: the husbands have been replaced with uh, TaskRabbit and your own credit card and job, which, hey, if you want to live like this, by all means, that is your choice, and I respect your decision. And I neither agree nor disagree with it. I would say that in the context of 2025, it makes a lot more sense. Just like it makes a lot more sense for men to not get married today because of the divorce rate, even if it's closer to the 40% that The Atlantic ascribed to it, that's still a significantly high risk. But that's just me. And here is who I presume is a single woman enjoying time in nature. Huh, that's an interesting earring. It's more doable to be single, says Bella de Paulo, PhD, a social scientist and the author of Single at Heart. If you don't want to cook, there's takeout. If you don't want to do your laundry, there's laundry service. If you don't want to do repairs in your house, you can go online and find people. So can men. Just saying, you don't have to do everything yourself. Of course, for me, instead of takeout, I would recommend finding the cheapest, easiest to make foods possible, like the rice and vegetables I've been having for dinner lately instead of mac and cheese or pasta. But for me specifically, that's what I have to do because I don't like sharing a kitchen with other people. So that's kind of how it has to be with supplemented with not takeout, but stopping places to eat if I feel that strongly about it, if I want something I can't make at home with whatever I buy. Like, I just got back from food shopping today. I spent 52.48 on 8 days worth of breakfast sandwich and materials for my deli rotisserie chicken, cheese, and jalapeno sandwich with the buns. For context, I got the buns, cheese, and the meat itself, obviously. I have enough supply of jalapenos that I didn't have to buy another jar for the time being. But hey, that's just me. You let me know in the comments down below how what you outsource in your life and what you are willing to do yourself. As I said, your situation may vary. Yeah, on this channel, I try to just explain how I do things and offer it as a template for you to modify to your needs and wants. Okay, now that we have gotten that disclaimer out there, that probably should have been thrown up first. Back to the article. Our interconnected world also means we don't need to rely on a live-in partner for socializing or emotional support. Communication technologies have made it much more fulfilling to be single, DePaulo says. If you're single and you live alone, you're not isolated. You're one text message, email, chat room away from the rest of the world. Personally, I would rather use these as a tool to get my friends together in real life. But yeah, it is nice to keep in touch with people like my friend in New York. I have not seen her in person in almost 6 years, but we text back and forth. So there's that. I guess I'm living proof that, well, not living proof of this exact dynamic because I'm a single man and not a single woman, but you get the idea. Although that all that being said, I would rather use these as tools to facilitate IRL meetups. While stigmas still persist around singlehood, especially for women, DePaulo also notes that the increase in unmarried people may be self perpetuating. As more people stay single or stay single longer, it becomes more likely that other people will do the same, she says. It seems like less of an unusual thing to do. Yeah, it's slowly becoming more and more acceptable. Single women are still propped up as girl bosses to some extent, despite the compilations of single women complaining about being single that Taylor the Fiend puts out like multiple times a day. Where does he get all this? Anyway, it's also becoming more accepted for men to be single as well. Slowly, maybe not as prominently, but it's becoming more accepted. Yes, there's always going to be people who get together because that's human nature deep down. Like I said earlier, we may be seeing a evolution of the human race. That's how I like to look at it, and you can argue that's just me coping with the realities of the world we live in. Of course, we can't have a discussion about single women in 2025 without acknowledging the dating dynamics at play. DePaulo's research doesn't dive into the particulars of dating. That's the one thing about single life I do not study, she says. But it takes only a brief conversation with a Tinder or Bumble user to understand how truly chaotic the act of winning, whining, and dining has become. And you could also have a conversation with single men using those apps about the struggle of the chaotic, or rather, the quiet nature of maybe trying to get a match and the emotional turmoil of getting ghosted, assuming it was even a real person to begin with. Getting back to the article, the dating game. And I'm going to drop the female voice she's quoting someone who, unless she's, unless a direct quote from a woman is in there. In anticipation of reporting this story, I sent messages to a number of single women, all of whom date men, in my contacts, asking them to describe the current dating landscape in one word. Their responses: confusing, dreadful, depressing, bleak. Two wrote back that they hadn't been on a date in years, that they'd essentially given up trying. Welcome to the club, a word that San Diego-based therapist and relationship coach Leah Aguirre, licensed clinical social worker, author of Is This Really Love?, hears often from her female clients is overwhelming. Dating apps have given singles the impression that their options are both limitless and incredibly limited, she says. If I were able to use the filter to eliminate every woman who said yes or anything other than a clear and definitive no or sober to alcohol, smoking, and drugs, April 20th or otherwise, I already know that I would be wasting money on getting past that paywall. Honestly, it makes me think that dating apps should not be free to use. They should all be paid across the board so that it reduces the likelihood of OF promoters and gives the company resources to be able to get rid of bots or enforce the rules better and equally between both sexes. There are a lot of matches and connections, but nothing comes out of them. You're having these very surface level, unfulfilling interactions that don't go anywhere. For women especially, they feel like they cannot find partners that are aligned with their values. Now you know how I feel trying to find a woman who doesn't drink, smoke, or do drugs April 20th or otherwise. Indeed, for heterosexual couples, the ideological divide between the sexes only grows. Among Gen Z in particular, that gap has widened significantly, with women becoming more liberal and men becoming more conservative, making common ground that much more elusive. Aguirre is seeing that dynamic play out in her clients' experience. I work with a lot of liberal, educated, very open minded, progressive women, and it's a struggle to find liberal, open minded men, she says. And even if a man identifies as a liberal, he may still lack basic empathy about the current state of the world and or his date's lived experiences. People are engaging with men who don't seem upset or disturbed by the political climate, she says. That's frustrating and concerning for these women. My best guess, these men don't make politics the center of their lives. They are not activists. Yeah, if you're feeling that strongly on an issue, you need someone who's either indifferent to it or shares your level of interest in it, which would actually be another thing in common to have. So there's that. But my best guess is these are hardcore leftist, activist, feminist women. Wow. The men there, well, the men that they're describing are likely just moderates who are like, okay, this is XYZ. I don't feel one way or another about this, or worse, they might disagree with them and be like, you know what? This thing actually isn't really that bad, but I digress. Another dating stumbling block for a lot of the women Aguirre works with is finding a man with the same level of emotional intelligence. A theme I've been seeing as a therapist in the last 10 years or so is the women saying, he didn't ask about me, or I don't think he really knows me. It's these declarations of love or interest without really knowing the women. Can it hardly be coincidental that hashtag make men curious again has been popping up on social media? Well, Better Bachelor said that men don't really care about aspects of women like the job or the career or the degree. I'll admit, for me personally, it's not the priority, but it is interesting to know about, or it is an interesting detail worth noting. You let me know in the comments down below whether you as a man are curious about this or not. Anyway, getting back to the article. Of course, women are not wholly blameless for lackluster dating experiences. We ghost in breadcrumb and orbit too. But when researchers deem it necessary to create terms like man-keeping to explain the burden placed upon partnered women to facilitate their husbands' or boyfriends' social interactions, it's easy to see why a woman might opt to stay single rather than take on the extra emotional labor, especially if she isn't getting much in return. Women want to be in an equitable, mutual, respectful relationship where both people are openly sharing their concerns and their feelings, and it's reciprocated and it feels very safe and affirming, Aguirre says. We are setting the bar high and we're staying single longer, or in some cases, staying single forever and flourishing, according to researchers. I'm trying to think of something to say that doesn't touch the third rail. Okay, what's the best way I can put this? They said, she said that women want equitable, mutual, respectful relationship. Both are openly sharing their concerns and feelings. Yeah, they might be setting the bar a little too high or creating a negative feedback loop of asking for the openness. I saw this in Better Bachelor's video about how women get the ick when men actually share their feelings the way that they seem to be asking for here in this passage. If you're a woman who doesn't get the ick from that, or if you do, you let me know in the comments down below, because I'd love to know. But yeah, I can relate to feeling like I might be setting the bar too high. But here's the thing. If you set the bar too high, you have to accept the consequences or lower the bar. In my case, I refuse to lower the bar. I refuse to date a woman who drinks, smokes, or does drugs April 20th or otherwise. And I completely am more than happy to accept the consequences of staying single longer, if not forever. I can live with that. Because, like I said, a dating relationship should be the icing on the cake that is your life. Nice to have, but you can live without it. Others might disagree with me, and yeah, like I said, it's not for everyone, it's just a template for you to modify as you see fit. And yes, I know some people are going to call it a cope, but guess what? At a certain point, we all have to cope with this thing we call life somehow. Getting back to the article, A study in happiness. The field of singles research is, by and large, an emerging one. That's because experts have historically focused almost exclusively on married rather than unmarried people. The most obvious reason being that up until recently, it was a foregone conclusion that nearly everyone got married. It didn't matter if you wanted to, liked it, or if you were gay or straight. If you were gay, you faked being straight. Everyone did so, DePaulo says. So researchers studied marriage disproportionately. Yeah, kind of like in House of the Dragon, I believe it was one of the Valerians, I think they were called. Or between that show and Game of Thrones in general, there was a lot of pretending to be straight because that was the world they lived in, and they had to sneak around to do that. But yeah, also, for the majority of human history, marriage was the foregone conclusion, not the nice little option for the tax benefits and such. Okay, yeah, that's dangled in front of everyone as why you should do that, among other things. But it's no longer the foregone conclusion, and I am very happy that it is optional and not mandatory because it's not for everyone. And personally, I think what might help get the divorce rate down is start by not having marriages that shouldn't happen due to incompatibility or whatever other reasons. Have those not happen in the first place, and then you'll see the divorce rate go down. Problem solved. I mean, maybe the marriage rate will go down. But hey, like I said, it's better to not have toxic marriages happen in the first place. But I digress. Another reason for the disparity, which is still very much true today, according to DePaulo, is that many consider singlehood a temporary state, a drab, windowless waiting room until your number is finally called for the main event. A final big reason: marriage as an institution is venerated by society. It's been so celebrated and valued in ways that single life never has been, DePaulo says. You can see that in not just the disproportionate research, but in movies and TV shows and novels and song lyrics. They're filled with romantic themes. As a fan of movies and TV shows and a writer of three novels like these three up here, I can safely say that the romance thing was a part of it because that's what people wanted. There's usually been some form of love story or romantic interest for the protagonist at some point. Like, getting into my writing here for a moment. Foresight, yeah, I added a romantic interest for. I just forgot the name of my own protagonist. Unbelievable. I forgot the name. Rachel. That was her name. Yeah. I gave Rachel a romantic interest because generally that's what people wanted, and quite frankly, it made sense for the story. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Anyway, comment if you're interested in reading my book Foresight. I didn't mean to turn this into a sales pitch, but I guess you can find my books on Amazon if you really want to see. But getting outside of my writing, actually, I watched a movie last night that was all about the romance. It was a romantic drama called The Map That Leads to You. Kind of mid as a movie overall. And I'm pretty sure that it was subsidized by Spain's tourism board. Researchers like DePaulo are working to add new voices and perspectives to this homogenous conversation by studying singles and how they live their lives. And the results are painting a far different picture than popular culture would have us believe. For instance, that old chestnut about the sad cat lady sitting at home while the eligible bachelor paints the town red. As it turns out, single women are actually much more content with their circumstances than single men. On average, single women report higher overall well being, including higher relationship status, satisfaction, higher life satisfaction, higher sexual satisfaction, and lower desire for a partner compared to single men, according to a recent study cheekily titled Sisters Aren't Doing It for Themselves Gender Differences in Singles' Well-Being, which surveyed close to 6,000 global singles, the majority living in the US, the UK, and Canada, ranging in age from 18 to 75. Yeah, I have to say, I agree that singles should be studied more to at least understand or get a better understanding of the single life so that if someone's at a crossroads of destiny, they can make an informed decision based on research that's done to the best of people's ability. I know that some people think that psychology and sociology are BS fields because of self reporting, but you gotta work with something, you know? I log my mood into the Apple Health app for mental well being, which is a form of self reporting. It's a little more nuanced than a yes or no in terms of the scale of the feeling, and I can add the context. But that's just me. These results run contrary to the narratives that we see about women being lonely and miserable and desperate for romantic partners, says study lead author Elaine Hone, a PhD candidate in the Department of Psychology at the University of Toronto's Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Oh, didn't mean to do that. But you can see she's quite happy with swimming around that lake. Hone's research didn't pinpoint why single women are more content than single men, but she has theories based on earlier studies in the field. A lot of the existing work points to the notion that women tend to have stronger, more supportive social networks in general, she says. There's also the notion that for men in particular, oftentimes their number one source of emotional support is their romantic partner, whereas for women, they typically draw on more diverse source of support. Yeah, DBDR put this best. Women are better at maintaining social circles. Comment if you've seen this play out in real life or not. Typically, women are better about having social circles of some kind or better at maintaining them, I think is the best way to put it. I've told you about my Henriotti. I've told you about how I manage it by inviting them out to things I'm going to do anyway. And if they're not able to come, I'm still doing what I was going to do anyway. Okay, I didn't invite anyone to CF1 at the IMAX theater. But in my defense, it was the middle of the week. And I kind of just wanted to, again, it was an experiment. A high level of attunement to mental and emotional needs was a defining characteristic of the single women of color whom researcher Kimberly Martinez Phillips, PhD, a visiting scholar at the Center for Feminist Research at York University in Toronto, spoke with for her 2024 study titled The Feminization of Freedom, an analysis of love, happiness, and freedom from the perspective of child-free, never-married, single women of color. Many of them talked about being in therapy, talked about understanding the connection that they need to space and to privacy and to peace, and that they need to allot time for themselves to find that grounding, Phillips says. In many cases, it was because of their singlehood that their mental health thrived, not in spite of it. So I guess women protect their peace just like men do. These women really carved out their own fortresses of solitude, she says. It was more important to them in their health and their mental health than having a partner. How deeply a woman continues to desire or not a partner may also affect her happiness over time. Single women at midlife are more satisfied with their lives if they don't have a strong desire to partner up. But single men, regardless of how much or how little they want a romantic partner, do not experience this boost in satisfaction midlife, according to a 2023 study from the University of Toronto. Okay, how do I say this without touching the third rail? So, are you trying to say that the Taylor the Fiend compilations are lying to me? I mean, I'm not at the midlife point. I'm 28 years old for context. But I can say that I feel perfectly content without a girlfriend or wife. Like I said, icing on the cake, good to have, but not urgent. That midlife turning point is something that Jessica, a 39-year-old single woman living in the New York City area, is experiencing firsthand. While she's still open to finding a partner, she's realizing that her life is pretty great as is. If you would have asked me 10, 15 years ago, do you think you'll still be single at almost 40? I would have said no, Jessica says. It's not the life I necessarily imagined for myself, but the older I've gotten, there's less that I'm willing to compromise on, which I mostly mean as a good thing. I think I know who I am. I know what makes me happy. I know, more importantly, what I won't accept. In dating, you're looking for somebody who can be additive to your life to the life you've already built or are in the process of building for yourself. And if they're not making the life that I have better, I don't want that. Wow, Jessica is speaking my language here. Although, I bet if a man said the exact same thing, he'd probably be called an incel by other people. Me personally, I think that I agree with pretty much everything she said. Of course, I'm like a decade younger than her, but there is way less that I'm willing to compromise on. I've talked about them in previous videos, I think. Although I am planning to do a video about what I'm willing to compromise on and what's absolutely non-negotiable. I'd say I know who I am and I know what I like. And I also know that I will not accept drinking, smoking, drugs, April 20th or otherwise. Like I said, a girlfriend or wife or a partner in general should be icing on the cake, meaning an enhancement to the life you already have. Definitely not a detriment. And I say this for both sexes, by the way. Prioritizing their own needs and deprioritizing the search for a partner was a common theme among the women in Phillips's study, who ranged in age from 36 to 61. It's not that they were opposed to a relationship, but it wasn't the main storyline, Phillips says. It was the B side. To put it in video game terms, it's a side quest, not the main quest. Motherhood wasn't the main event either. Phillips says that the majority of the women in her study had decided from an early age that they likely wouldn't have children, so there wasn't a biological clock spurring their pursuit of a partner. Now, with the hindsight that age allows, the women have few regrets about those big life choices. That's this idea that if you're a woman, you'll be on your deathbed regretting that you didn't marry or didn't have children, Phillips says. That's not who these women are that I interviewed. So I guess none of them are going to end up being the archetype that Tim Pool described of the doctor saying, I'm sorry, it's terminal. Is there anyone we can call? And then they won't be depressed just lying there while Price is Right reruns run until, well, it's over. But hey, as I always say, people are free to make their choices when it comes to dating and such, but I still think they need to learn to accept the consequences of said decision. Of course, not all single women are child free, and whether single women with children are happier than single women without children is a thornier question to answer. A Pew Research study on the happiness of parents versus non parents from 2014, newer research on the topic is scant, found that 69% of single parents said they were either very happy or pretty happy, while 84% of childless singles answered the same way. The results did not differentiate between men and women. DiPaolo notes that research like this, done at one point in time rather than over the course of years, paints an incomplete picture. It's a correlation, not causation, she says. I am legitimately curious about how it would break down if they separate it by single dads and single moms, and then childless men and childless women. Just out of curiosity, you know. What's clear from additional research is that as single people age and cultivate the lives they want for themselves outside of a relationship, they continue to get happier. Those were the findings of a longitudinal study involving more than 6,000 people between the ages of 40 and 85, for example, which found that single people's satisfaction increased over a 6 year span, while coupled people's did not. It's worth noting that much of the singles research cited in this story included LGBTQ participants, but comparisons were not drawn between straight and queer folks. Well, at least we can say that. Well, I'm really curious about how they measured it. Though I'm assuming that a lot of this is self-reporting because a lot of this stuff comes down to self-reporting because at a certain point, that's really all you can get. You can't really follow someone around. Maybe if you could have a wearable like this be able to transmit data that can relate to it, like say heart rate, whatever else they can measure. Of course, that could be linked to a separate medical issue. Who knows? But what I do know is that it's the best that we can work with for now. The costs of going solo. The findings that support the sheer contentedness of single women become even more intriguing and meaningful when you consider the very real challenges that single women face daily, from social slights to systemic inequalities. DePaulo, who calls herself single at heart, meaning that she has purposefully chosen not to partner up because she thrives on her own, has often found herself the odd woman out, whether it's being excluded from events entirely or being downgraded when a friend starts dating someone or gets married. That's pretty painful, she says. Yeah, make time for your friends if you're in a dating relationship. Don't excommunicate them, especially if the partner asks you to do that. You know what? If the partner asks you to excommunicate that friend and any friends or all of your friends, if it's a specific friend because of a red flag they see that you might have ignored, try and take a second look and then decide from there whether you want to excommunicate them. But yeah, if they try to isolate you 100%, this goes both ways, by the way. Break up with them immediately. There are also the literal costs of being single. Singles tax alert, which are often higher than those of being partnered. Couple people don't just split rent, they split bills, says Shawnee Silver, a 43-year-old single woman living in New Orleans, and the author of A Single Revolution. For instance, one is likely on the other's insurance. That's $600 that a single woman is paying on top of already paying rent by herself. Are you renting out a place that has room for two people, or did you not look for the smaller option that's better suited to a single person? The simple act of securing a place to live might be harder for singles too. DePaulo and her colleagues found that rental agents were more likely to rent to a married couple than to two friends when all other factors, such as income, were equal. I would love to know how they were able to prove that, and then how those landlords didn't get sued into the ground for discrimination of some kind. Even financial and employment laws and protections are often written in favor of married folks, says DePaulo. I can work side by side with a married colleague and put the same amount of money into Social Security. When my colleague dies, her money goes to her spouse. Whereas when I die, my money goes back into the system. I can't designate it to my best friend or my nephew or anyone else. I lose that money I earned. Wait, so you can't write a last will and testament to go to leave everything to your nephew. So are you telling me that Harry Potter lied when Sirius Black left everything to Harry? Okay, maybe that's not the best example because we're talking about the wizarding world in the UK and not real world America. But still, this is the first I'm hearing about not being able to just leave it to a nephew or something. I'm pretty sure if you write a will, you can leave it to whoever or whatever organization you want. Don't quote me on that, though. I'm going to have to ask my sister, who is a lawyer, about this when I'm done recording. Similarly, the Family and Medical Leave Act allows a person to take time off from work without losing their job or health insurance to care for a sick family member, parent, child, or spouse. But if a member of your chosen family, say your best friend, falls ill, the same option is not afforded to you. Yeah, they need to rewrite these laws to accommodate it, although I'm pretty sure that yeah, they don't weigh it the same. Or I guess they have that standard so that they can't be forced to. Because let's say, I wonder if, in a hypothetical, two people at the exact same time have the exact same situation like that, but one is with their parent, the other is their friend. And let's just say, well, I'm pretty sure by law the company would be mandated to have both of them be able to go and do their thing if the law allowed for friends. I didn't know it was that okay, I had a feeling that it would be okay. The FMLA thing, I get because you want it to be family, whether it's biological or legal. So does that not does that not work for in-laws? Although I'm pretty sure adoptive parents would have to be included under this because that could probably lead to a lawsuit if they said, no, you can't do that because this person is not genetically your parent. Again, talk to an actual expert and not me. Despite it all, many single women say they will happily pay the costs of being single, given that the reward is so high. Namely, says Silver, living an independent, customized, unencumbered life. And so can men. My happiness is not a consolation prize version of happiness, Silver says of her singledom. Jessica agrees. It would be great to have somebody, a husband, a partner, but it's not necessary for me. It's not a piece that I feel like I need to have for a complete and happy future. I am happy. I love my life. I love the people I have in my life. Once again, Jessica is speaking my language. It's a truly refreshing approach to happiness, and one that more people can stand to learn a thing or two from. What lessons can single women teach us? For one, the importance of connections with friends and family outside of a romantic relationship or partnership. I think people seek relationships thinking that that's going to complete me or make me happy. Aguirre says, there are so many things that a partner cannot give you, and single women are finding those things and leaning on those things. Those platonic relationships become imperative in later life when, as is often the case, a woman outlives her male spouse or partner. That ends up being one of the reasons why single women often do so well later in life, DePaulo says. They already know how to live independently and have been doing so their entire adult lives. Honestly, I think that's a little offensive to widowers. I think a better way to put it would be they're more used to it, or you could say they don't have to experience that loss. I think that might be a better way to put it. Or if you want to say that I somehow made it more offensive to widowers, feel free to roast me in the comments. Another applicable takeaway: find moments of freedom and autonomy when available. Single women give themselves the space, the time that they want, DePaulo says. Married women can't do it to the extent that single women can, because they can carve out opportunities to just spend some time by themselves, either extending their time shopping or doing errands and stopping by a coffee shop. Yeah, they do have more choices. There's also that keen focus on mental health. You know how on the plane they say, put on your own mask first, Phillips says. What's wrong with women saying, I am focusing on myself, I am prioritizing myself? And why does that make you a selfish person? Ultimately, says Phillips, whether married or single, no one should measure self worth by the yardstick of romantic relationships. We shouldn't be defining who we are as people by who we have sex with, who we go to dinner with, who we give birth to. We are people who are of value in the ways in which we choose to engage in society, she says. To reduce women's lives to whether or not you're a wife, whether or not you're a mother, is so reductive and not helpful to moving society and women forward. And that's something we can all raise a spoonful of Haagen-Dazs to, single or otherwise. Oh boy, that was a long one, but it was worth it because we learned that a lot of single women do in fact seem to feel happy about it, assuming they're being honest or at least truthful. I know that the Taylor the Fiends of the world are saying that they're just saying that to cope. The Matt Walshes and Tim Pools would say they're exclaiming it clear as day so they can delude themselves. That's what they would say, not me. Me personally, I am all for letting people just do as they see fit. You know, if you're like Jessica in this article, who, by the way, pretty much spoke my language when it came to this stuff, if you prefer being single, I say you should be left alone. And to those who are mad at people for being single by choice, why do you care? Like, the reason I read this article was not to roast any of these women because, like I said, I respect their decision. Especially because I think men should be free to make that exact same decision without being called an incel or a chud or a loser or anything other than a human being who is making a choice whose decision we should respect because it was made by an adult of sound mind. But I'm gonna wrap it up here. You let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Let me know if you see the double standard, if you agree with these women, or if you disagree, I'm happy to hear you out. You know, again, I ask, why do you care if these people are single? Don't forget to subscribe for cultural commentary and rants from a man caught between generations. And last but certainly not least, feel free to join me at the Zillennial Nexus Point Discord where we can keep this conversation going. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.